What's up guys, I'm Josh Mosiman from Motocross Action Magazine, and in this MXA tested video, we have the 2022 KTM 250SX two-stroke. I personally love riding two-strokes, and I know a lot of people on our YouTube channel love watching videos about two-strokes, so we're really excited about this one. For the new model season, KTM did make one update, not really an update. The graphics are updated. The frame is orange, which is by and far better than black in my opinion. This bike did receive a few updates last year in 2021, and we actually didn't get a 2021 KTM 250 two-stroke because the KTM was low on stock last year. So we got a Husky TC 250 two-stroke last year, but didn't get to ride this model. So some of the updates for last year on this bike, it got the WP Exact air forks. They got the major updates that all of the 2021 models got, with increased air and oil bypass slots that allow the forks to move a lot better. Last year in 2021, the two-strokes and the cross-country bikes got a new float setting at the mid-valve. It's an extra little spring in there that helps the shims close. And if you know anything about forks and suspension in general, you know that oil is flowing through the shim stack. It looks like a Christmas tree, little metal discs, and those are what creates the valving in your suspension. So if you have really stiff metal discs in your mid-valve, it's gonna make the oil harder to go through, and that's gonna create a stiffer suspension setting, where if the metal shims are a lot softer and more flexible, maybe they're thinner, that's gonna make the oil go through faster through the valve, and that's gonna make a softer setting. So this float valve setting basically closes off the valve easier, and what that does is it allows WP technicians and R&D guys over there to make the fork soft enough to be comfortable on a two-stroke and a cross-country bike, and it's definitely a big update and something that we really like about this 250 two-stroke. Another update this bike got last year is the Gunner Gasser style roller actuated throttle body. It's supposed to help durability and just make a smoother throttle pull. So now the throttle cable goes over a little bit of a roller. It's a Gunner Gasser style. It's something that came out a long time ago, and it's similar to that. As for the rest of it, we got SKF seals in the linkage last year to make that move a little bit smoother. Overall, this bike hasn't changed a ton besides those suspension updates. Always a big topic comparing the KTM 250 two-stroke with the Yamaha YZ250 two-stroke. So right off the bat, I can tell you, if you're looking for a bike that's comfortable, that's easy to ride, and you're not as worried about weight or horsepower, the YZ250 has always been a little bit easier to ride. The MXA Wrecking Crew like the bottom end power of the YZ250 two-stroke from Yamaha, and we've had a little more of a tough time riding the KTM 250 two-stroke. It definitely takes a rider that's more aggressive. You have to shift it a lot more, but it is lighter, it is faster, and it's definitely better for a pro level rider or anybody who's looking to race to get the whole shot and win the moto. So for 2022, Yamaha has announced that they're finally updating their YZ250 two-stroke for the first time in over 16 years. They're also making big updates to their Yamaha YZ125 two-stroke, so we are very excited to ride those, and I'm looking forward to comparing this model to the updated one. I haven't been able to do that yet, so I can only talk about past experiences on the YZ250. YZ250s have been a little bit easier to ride. They have a little more torque on the bottom, which makes it easier to come out of the corners. Or the KTM 250 two-stroke, you have to rev it up a little bit more. Sometimes play with gearing, play with the power valve as well to get it coming out of corners easier. So this model does come with the WP Exact air forks, just like the rest of the KTM, Husqvarna, gas models, and they're a lot lighter than the standard coil spring forks, 3 pounds lighter to be exact. So that brings this bike way down compared to the rest of the KTM models and compared to some of the other brands. This bike weighs in on the scale at 210 pounds. It's pretty light for a full-size motocross bike. In comparison, KTM 450 weighs in at 223 pounds, so that's 13 pounds heavier for a 450 four-stroke. Other models like a Honda 450 four-stroke, 233 pounds, so that's 23 pounds heavier than this KTM 250 two-stroke. So immediately for me, once I got onto the track, I could feel how light the bike was. It was so much fun to get back on this model after not riding it for a while. I've been riding a lot of four-strokes lately, testing 2022 models. Getting onto the track, first things that stuck out to me, this thing is super fast. It hits hard once you get into the power. It's super light, super easy to move around. The suspension is great. I really like these air forks, and I like the updates that they got in 2021. And the brakes, the Brembo brakes are super strong, and it just makes them even stronger when you have a bike that's this light. So imagine riding a mountain bike that's super heavy with brakes, and you get on the brakes and it's harder to slow down. Imagine riding a bike that's 10 pounds lighter. It's a lot easier to slow down. Same thing in motocross. People debate, oh, weight doesn't matter, you're on a dirt bike, it's got an engine. No, I'm here to say that weight does matter, and that's why we pointed out in every single one of our bike tests. Another reason why the Brembo brakes are so good is they have the steel braided brake lines. So basically what that means is that the hydraulic fluid that's used to compress the brakes and slow your bike down, it isn't affected by heat, and it isn't, expanding a rubber tube. So that does help make a lot more precise feel at the front and rear brakes. So talking about suspension settings, as for the MXA Wrecking Crew, today, me, a pro level rider, weighing in about 170, 175 on a bad day, I ran the forks at 10 bar, which is 145 PSI. It's recommended to run 10.4 bar on the 250 two-stroke, which is 152 PSI. A lot stiffer than they recommend for KTM 125 two-stroke, which is all the way down at 8.4 bar. So a full 2 bars down, which makes it quite a bit softer for a 125. Reason being, the KTM 250 two-stroke is heavier than the 125 two-stroke, so it's putting more weight on the suspension components. Also, the engine is a lot stronger than a 125, so that puts more weight on the rear end when you're on the gas, and it also puts a little more weight on the front end when you're braking this bike as well. So those are some things you have to factor in when you're looking at the air pressure that's recommended for this bike. I tried stock air pressure for me today. The track was rough. I went down a little bit from 10.4 down to 10. I tried going even lower, but then it got too soft for me. So that was something that's really nice about these forks. You pump a little bit of air in there, and you're able to find the correct setting for you. As a rule of thumb, we always try to get our zip ties within 1.5 inches from the bottom, and that's kind of our sweet spot. These bikes do come with little rubber grommets on the fork legs, and you think that you can trust them to see exactly how much your forks are compressing, but you really can't trust them. They fall down super easily, so we still put a zip tie on the fork legs the old-fashioned way, just to measure how much they're compressing. I also ran the sag today at 105. It's kind of a standard for KTM models, even for the two-strokes for MXA. And as for the forks, I went in 4 clicks to close off that mid-valve bleed hole that I talked to you about earlier. That made it a little bit harder for the oil to flow through the mid-valve and created a little bit of a stiffer setting. So I dropped the air pressure down from what stock recommended, and then I went in 4 clicks, which got us to 8 clicks out on compression. As for the shock, I left it. As for the rebound on the forks, left it. Talking a little bit more about the engine on the 250SX from KTM. As mentioned, you have to ride it pretty aggressively to get it into the meat of the power, more aggressive than you have to do on the YZ250 two-stroke. A couple things that help this bike out a lot. If you want a little more over rev, we recommend running a Pro Circuit silencer on this bike. Pro Circuit definitely helps up the over rev power on this bike. Something you should also know is that the stock pipe from KTM is pretty good. So we've seen a lot of riders, and we've personally done it ourselves, where we run the stock pipe, but then run a Pro Circuit silencer. Also, as a rule of thumb, when it comes to KTM two-strokes, Pro Circuit helps get a little more over rev and top end power out of these bikes, where FMF helps getting a little more bottom end power. So I go back and forth between different bike builds and different races on this model, just depending on how I want to move the power around. Those are kind of the 2 options you have with FMF and Pro Circuit. I also should note that the stock Mikuni TMX carburetor worked great for us today. Pretty close to 100 degrees, I bet, today, with very low humidity as we have here in Southern California. The stock jetting worked great for us. We also ran the ventilated airbox cover just to get more air coming into the engine. The combustion engines, they use spark, fuel, and air to make them go faster, so we always try to get more air into the engine to help out overall throttle response and power. A couple things to keep your eye on if you buy a KTM 250SX two-stroke. Always check the spokes on all KTM models. This is something we've complained about for years now. The spokes always get loose when you first buy the bike. On any motorcycle you buy from the dealer, you should always check the spokes. You know, really each day that you ride, but especially right after you buy it. New wheels and new rims definitely come loose early on as in the break-in process. KTMs, unfortunately, they come loose easier than they would on a Yamaha, Honda, Kawasaki, or another brand. Also check out the sprocket bolts, same issue with KTM. Also, if you have the air forks, one thing that people complain about, and I even am a little bit bummed about, is that you always have to check the air pressure in the forks, and you have to bleed those little extra air bleed slots on both fork legs. So something you really need to keep an eye on is those air forks. Yes, you get 3 pounds weight reduction. Yes, you get, to adjust your spring rate on the fly by putting more or less air in there. So you get a lot of benefits, and I think they work great. At MXA Wrecking Crew, we love these forks. However, you do have to keep an eye on your air pressure. So set it in the morning. Sometimes I could go a whole day and feel pretty good with the forks. Other times, if it's hotter, or if I'm leaving my bike sitting out in the sun, or if I'm riding longer motos and it's getting a lot of heat built up, that definitely expands the air and makes the air pressure in the forks a little more harsh, and so you have to keep your eye on your air forks. So people complain about air forks, people are hesitant about them, but as long as you keep your eyes on the air pressure and keep checking it once or twice throughout the day after setting it in the morning, you're gonna probably love your air forks, and these are just some things that you need to know before buying a KTM off the showroom floor. As for the price, this bike retails for $8,499 for 2022. It also comes in white and red. So Gas is making a 2022 250 two-stroke for the first time this year. They didn't have one last year in 2021. They also didn't have a 350 four-stroke last year, so they're introducing both of those models into their lineup. The Gas is very similar to this bike. The airbox cover is a lot more closed off, so that does affect power. In our experience, the Gas always has softer suspension, so that definitely changes how the bike handles. And they have the cast aluminum triple clamps that flex a lot more and provide a different feel on the track as well. So there are differences when you go from KTM to Gas. And when you get the Husqvarna, that bike is lowered. It's a lot lower at the seat, creates a lot different of a handling character as well. It's got the carbon composite plastic subframe on the Husky, so that changes it too. And it also has a more closed off airbox. So there's a few different differences between the KTM, Gas, and Husky 250 strokes. As for Yamaha, we are very excited to ride the Blue machine for 2022. I'm excited to ride both the 250 and 125s from Yamahas. And as soon as we do, we'll have a video on our YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe to Motocross Action's YouTube channel and click the notifications button so you can get an update once we ride those new bikes and when we ride other new models that we got coming down the pipeline here soon. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, motocrossactionmag.com if you want to find out more about this bike and other bikes that we're testing. Also, we're going to have a full in-depth article about this bike in a future issue of Motocross Action Magazine. So if you haven't subscribed to the magazine or picked one up at your local newsstand, be sure to do so if you want to learn all kinds of stuff about motorcycles. And thank you guys for tuning in. That's all. And if you have some more time, click the thumbnails now to see some of our latest videos.